the same lines, James, do you think that really for any Liberal politician or coalition politician, it is possible to say, no, I'm only interested in economic issues, the other issues can take care of themselves?
It's a great question, Miranda, and you might have been reading recently in the media this theory that the focus in the coalition in recent years from people like myself and Amanda on cultural issues like freedom of speech and like religious liberty has somehow necessarily come at the expense of a focus on economic issues, and that the reason why the coalition might not have done more on the economic reform front is because of being distracted by culture. I think that's such a profound misreading of politics, it's a dangerous idea. I have never met anyone who said we should be really timid and shy about our values on culture, but we should be really bold and reformist on economics. Typically the people who think we should be timid and shy on culture think we should be timid and shy on economics too. And typically it's people like Amanda and I who think we should be manning the barricades on culture, who also want to man the barricades on economic reform as well. I think it's a continuum between people who are willing to put themselves out there and take a risk politically and be outspoken and say what we believe, and people who are obsessed with what they perceive to be popular, what they perceive to be electorally advantageous, which often I think doesn't work out that way, but that's the theory that they of their politics. As you know, Miranda, there's nothing that a Q&A studio audience likes more than an international lefty who's come to Australia to tell us about how bad we are. They are just, every time, there's one each episode and the audience laps it up. Yes, tell us how bad we are, tell us how terrible Australia is. It's what they come to see. One thing that's really important about going on Q&A, which for my sins I've now done a couple of times, is remembering that the studio audience is as unrepresentative as you can imagine. And if you're a Liberal and you're going on and the Q&A audience is cheering you, you are way, way off track. They should be booing, they should be hissing, they should be scowling. When you look into the audience, and there's quite a few of them there, you shouldn't see a smiling face looking back at you, and that's typically been my experience. When I first went on Q&A and I was at the IPA, I was quite young, I would have been 22, 23, and I survived my first outing, and a few people asked me afterwards, like, gee, you did all right on Q&A, how did you survive? And I said, it's like every undergraduate arts tutorial I've ever attended. The tutor is biased. The tutor is biased, every fellow panellist is an enemy, you have no sympathy at all, but sometimes you'll say something that's important and on the way out someone will whisper to you, I agree with you, thank you for saying that. So it's really important to remember that, and I think student politics and being in that such a left-wing dominated environment on university campuses, and they get worse every year, is the best training ground for Q&A or politics generally. It just trains you to know what you believe, to know why you believe it, and to know how to argue for it in a hostile environment. And I think it's important in politics to have people from a broad array of backgrounds, and not everybody should be exactly like Amanda and I. A few more would be good, but not everyone should be exactly like us. But there is a real value in having known and grown up understanding what the left is and what they set out to do. Because if you've gone and pursued other careers, a life in business, and say you turn to politics later in life because you think, oh, I've been successful in business, I'm going to be a great politician too. Sometimes you've missed out on what other people have been fighting for a very, very long time. And if you're not self-aware enough to recognise that, I think it can lead to dangerous outcomes.
I don't think parties like One Nation do very well when we are doing our best. When the Liberal Party is confidently doing all of the things it is meant to do, there is no space for a One Nation or a Palmer United type party, because people see that we aren't using weasel words, we are forthright, we are who we are, we're comfortable with that, we'll argue for it, and people start to see that there is leadership on a set of conservative values, which is fundamentally what those people want to see. They're just not necessarily seeing it right now in the kind of blunt fashion they've been looking for in recent years. I think that during the Howard years, we were able to take a lot of the wind out of Pauline Hanson and Co.'s sails simply by doing our thing well. And I think Scott Morrison's got the capacity to do that too. He just needs a little bit more time in order for people who have been frustrated and disillusioned for a long period of time to wake up to that. They'll get there. Policies like income splitting, for instance, are ones that I really support. It provides, I think, real choice for families about what they're going to do about raising children, what they're going to do about work, and how they're going to manage it. You know, it's fine for us to provide a degree of publicly subsidised childcare, and that will suit some families. But I think we need to recognise the equal value of other families' choice to have someone stay home for a period of time, because we know that delivers good things for the strength of a family unit, and we know that that delivers children who, as much as, you know, it might not be PC to say it, usually have better life outcomes. So I think we also need to be open to the idea of tax deductibility. Nannies, I mean, we need to be providing a real suite of choices for all of the different ways that people try and manage their desire to have a fulfilling family life and their need and their desire to contribute in a work life. Those things have tax consequences, sure, but I think when we frame those things in terms of, for instance, tax deductions, rather than you know, allowances that come from Centrelink, then we're tying productivity of a family unit to access to those benefits, and I think that's a good thing too. Yeah.
How would you characterise the threat of a shortened government?
Look, I would characterise it as thoroughly backward in terms of its approach to the economy. It goes against everything we have learned from about 2 centuries of developing a free market. It goes contrary to all of those things, and then it's culturally quite hard left, postmodern neo-Marxist. Again, that's a complex thing to convey, but it's a part of a journey we have to help people to understand, because this election, I think, is going to be absolutely crucial for whether or not we're able to turn that around.
But of course, overseas, you've seen the Bernie Sanders experience is similar in London. Those sort of policies are back in vogue again. They're populist.
They are, to an extent. They are in vogue among a very committed and noisy cohort, but I don't think they appeal to everybody. And I think once there is a good cohort of people explaining the extremely positive and freedom-giving and choice-giving opportunity that comes from what is really a centre-right view of the world, I think that too can take on some of the fashionable, rebellious quality that you know, might have once been held by the Sanders types.
Well, I'm slightly more qualified to answer this than I was 3 months ago. I'm on that journey right now with my wife Lydia. She will be more of an expert in it than me, given the nature of my job and my responsibilities. Gee, that's a hard one. I guess it's about providing guidance and direction for a human being until they can provide it for themselves. Making decisions for them before they're equipped to do that for themselves, protecting them before they're equipped to do that for themselves, but I hope preparing them to do it for themselves as soon as possible. Because one of the really lamentable thing about the way that young people have been raised in more recent years is they don't ever appear to be prepared to make decisions for themselves. Good, bad or indifferent, they seem to be increasingly protected from themselves and prevented from being allowed to develop maturity and wisdom and experience, and I think that comes at a very, very profound cost for them as individuals. We are never fully human and adult until we are masters of our own destinies, and taking that away from someone by raising them in cotton wool is a very dangerous and regrettable thing to do.
Can I just intervene in tell us about your childhood and what shaped you, why you weren't a cotton wool helicopter parented baby?
I think I was just 5 years out from being in that generation, the helicopter generation. But as some of you will know, my parents don't share my politics. They are left-leaning, they've been union members for most of their working lives, they've never voted Liberal. They might have voted for me below the line at the last election. I haven't actually asked them because I'd rather not know just to be on the safe side. They tend to vote Labor, they sometimes even vote Green. But what my parents are is very liberal in the traditional sense. They are very open-minded, and they raised me and my younger brother to think for ourselves and to have our own ideas, and the dinner table at home growing up was a place of debate and discussion, and I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for their tolerance and support, and also their steadfast defence at family barbecues and Christmases and every other social occasion, because not only do my parents not share my politics, none of my uncles and aunties or any of their friends or any of my grandparents do either. So my poor parents have been apologising for me and my views for their whole lives, for my whole life, even though they don't share them. So I'm very grateful for that.
Paterson's come to Christmas at our house.
Yeah.
And tell us about your own upbringing. Are you a rebel like James?
Look, no. My dad was a rebel, and his parents were very left-wing, they would be like Labour left kind of type people. They were in, my grandmother on my dad's side was a member of the teachers' union and worked in a school, and my grandfather was a cable maker, and so he was, quite unionist from that angle too. My dad was the rebel, and he probably still is. He's a plumber, and he's always been in business for himself. And he, from an economic perspective, found the union way of doing things as very life-limiting, always limiting your ability to achieve, which was something he, in his very blunt, very expletive-laden way, he still expresses in a very forthright kind of way. Growing up, it was good. It was a normal Australian upbringing. Mum worked in a shop, like as a retail assistant in a chemist, and sometimes in a glasses shop. And Dad was a plumber. My sister and I, we had a good upbringing. We didn't necessarily have a lot materially for all of it. We grew up during the recession we had to have, and I can remember my parents struggling to keep the house during that period, and Mum being on the phone to the banks asking for more time and things like that. And I think that does shape my view of how we manage an economy. It certainly led to me becoming politically interested and starting to read about how we do this well and how we do this badly. It probably began my political interest. But we're a pretty upper family.
And did you think that you wanted to be a politician from that moment, or was it an evolution?
No. Look, I was raised with the belief that the first service you can do for anybody is to look after yourself. Your next service is to raise your family and give them what they need to both survive materially, but also to succeed. But from there, your job is to serve others. And so I have always, I guess, had that ethic as part of what I would do in my life, but I was never prescriptive about the way in which that could be done. That could be done, by being a barrister and doing, work for people who need it, using your expertise to advance their interests. It could be done by doing community service. It can be done a bunch of ways. It was really once I started to get very frustrated about particularly, the cultural conversation in this country that I sort of went, this is really frustrating and I can't bear it anymore, and unless someone's going to fix it, I think I'm going to have to.
We're lucky you did.